Hello, friends. Welcome to the Nope Coach podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Culberg, joined today by Alex Sanfilippo. And I'm really excited for this conversation because you've got a lot of experience in podcasting, both guesting and hosting, and talking about saying no and basically all the things. Because I think, and we're chatting about this before we hit record, podcasting is such a great way to build your no muscle as both a guest and a host, because sometimes people who are, people pleasers, martyrs, can't say no, as soon as an opportunity comes along, you'll be so tempted just to say yes because, you don't want to waste it, or because you feel excited to be asked or invited. And you don't tend to think through the consequences of your yes. So if you're invited to something that really isn't in your wheelhouse or aligned with your message, like I'm trying to think of an example without being offensive. It's me, I usually don't mind. But like, say somebody invited me on a show and their platform is all about Bitcoin and I know nothing about Bitcoin, then I just kind of look like an idiot. So it doesn't like picture me in my strength. And the conversation isn't going to be typically of use to their audience because they're usually talking about this one thing. And then I'm talking about, boundaries and saying no. So I think sometimes it really does pay to have a back and forth exchange. Do a little bit, definitely do research before you pitch a show, because sometimes I think people want to collect podcasts like Pokemon cards. Like I want to be on all of them, catch them all. And also too, and I'd love your take on this, the podcast, the recording is such a small part of the process. Like it's what happens afterward. And so many people like ghost the host, like they've recorded it, done, next. And I'm like, what about the relationship? What about the networking with the person that you're actually talking to? What about and reusing it? Like a podcast has a half-life of like 3 years as opposed to an Instagram post, which is like 3 hours. And you can keep reusing that. And then people who come to you, like I was chatting to a lady yesterday, she said, I just saw this video that Gary Vee posted and she was talking about it in the interview. And I was like, did he just post it or did you just come across it? Because sometimes because you've just listened to it. And you and I were talking about an episode I did. It was a recent one, but it wasn't my most recent one. So yeah, Alex, where would you like to start?
Susan, first off, thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate being here, excited about it. And I've been listening to your show, and as somebody who's been listening, I'm just amped up to be here. And you do such great work. Like I love the flow of this. So to me, like I want to jump straight into what you just said. Like recording is such a small part of the process. And for everyone listening, Suzanne and I, just before we hit record, we were like sharing back and forth stories about like this happened, this happened, this happened. I'm going to share a differone one that you have not heard yet, but so that everyone's
Okay.
here for the first time.
Yes.
I was in that mode of like I'm going to say yes to being a guest on podcast, and I think that many people that are on the guesting side, we get stuck in that, and it kind of gives a little bit of an adrenaline, like it's like a high. It's like, ooh, yeah, I'm getting accepted by all these people now, and I said yes to one. And I just asked the guy, this was before Podmatch was a thing. So I didn't have any like real frame for research or anything like that. But I just asked, I'm like, what do you want to get into? He's like, your business. That's all I want to get into today. I was like, great, I can do that. Like that's easy for me. I'm ready to go. I didn't listen to his show. I didn't look at his profile, nothing. And it was like a live recording. This is before live was like really cool. I get on. Suzanne, his opening question to me was this: Hey, Alex, welcome to the show. Do you hold yourself responsible for your parents' divorce? His opening question. I was like, uh,
What?
no, what? And he's like, yeah, do you hold yourself responsible? I was like, well, I was in like my late 20s. So like, no. And I don't think I had anything to do with it. And then every question from there just got more and more intense. Here's what I didn't realize. When he said, I want to get into your business, he meant into the business of Alex Sanfilippo. And that's how his show is. It's like a full on an hour interrogation done live where other people can pitch in. What? Like, but I did that to myself by saying yes without really looking at the rest of the process. And your point, like recording is a very small part of it, right? Like, yeah, that was an hour, but I should have spent more than just 5 seconds of sure before getting into it, right?
But that's
And there's a lot to be said for that.
such a great example of a failure to communicate. Like if someone says, oh yeah, we'll get into your business, and you thinking, oh, I have my own business. Like I would have done that too. If you'd said, actually, I do research. I don't like to be ever on the spot. Like now, having done so many episodes is different. But anyway, all that to say, I would have, had I not turned up prepared, thought the same thing. Like my business is in the Nope Coach, not my business is in my personal business. Because if someone said that to me, it'd be an immediate no. That's not because also too, what are you sharing? Because there's one show that I went on that was like a coaching session. And I was like, I don't mind. I like being coached, whatever. But what I didn't realize was, and I'd listened to a couple of shows and then they coached people and they recorded them and they were free. And then people could listen and it's an example of their style. I thought the concept was great. I didn't realize how much they were going to pitch me afterward. Like, seriously, like at the end, as soon as we hit stop, it was like, great. So you enjoyed that? Like, now here's my program. And I was like, excuse me? And then the follow-ups that basically kept coming until I had to say, please don't email me anymore because I hadn't subscribed. So there wasn't a simple unsubscribe option. But, in terms of podcasting, so I didn't say at the beginning that Alex has a platform called Podmatch, which I'm on as both a guest and a host. And I didn't use it until recently. I think I've been on there 4 or 5 months. And I will be honest, I'm nothing if not truly transparent. At the beginning, I was a bit opposed to it because I was like, I've been on lots of shows. I don't need to pay for this. I know how to pitch. I know how to research. But I can't remember what the turning point was for me. I think it was when you were talking about launching a network, and I liked the idea of having connections with other hosts because it's kind of a lonely existence, really, all entrepreneurship when you're online, because you don't have the coffee, water cooler chats kind of thing. So that was what, drew me in. But honestly, I was like, why didn't I do this earlier? Because you have all the things available on either end. You have topic suggestions. Actually, I've got a suggestion for you. I'm going to ask, are you open to a tweak that I think for the platform might work well? You might be like, no,
Listen,
Suzanne.
if we're going to do this in real time, I'm just taking notes. So if anyone hears me typing, I'm in. But yeah, go for it. Yeah.
And it was also prompted by your first story you just shared there. It may, and you might be like, this is a dumb idea, but before I had Podmatch, one of the onboarding questions I asked people is, are there any no-go zones? So in the platform, because you have what are suggested questions, you could put, are there any no-go zones? So you might be like, I don't want to talk about my children. Like, some people are really, they don't even want to talk about the fact that they're parents, or they don't name their children. They'll be like, I have a son and a daughter and that's it. And I always ask, because I do talk to a lot of mumpreneurs, and I'm also a mumpreneur. I'm very open about sharing my children, but I respect people who don't want to bring their children into their business. Or in your case, like anything about family, anything outside of this, most people do put NA, like, not applicable or whatever. Or if you touch on something that is sensitive, like, is there a way that I know that, to move out of this, especially for me, because I don't edit my show. But it is something I tend to ask the guests at the beginning, though I didn't ask you today, are there any no-go zones? Because, yeah, there could be topics or things that are particularly sensitive to someone, and you don't know that you've overstepped a boundary until you've done it.
Listen, I'm not one to BS or anything like that. I love it. I can guarantee that's going into one of our next upcoming updates. I was like typing this up. I'm like, how come we didn't think about this already? So
Yeah, well,
thank you for opening this. Good. Absolutely. It's so needed, because here's the, like, for me, I'll tell you what I'm going to put, because we're going to add it for sure. Thank you for the suggestion. That's great. I'm going to add, like, I don't want to talk about my former aerospace career. Like, and I'll even put, like, I'm down to like reference it, but like, I don't want the whole episode to be about like this 15-year career I had in the past. I loved it. I did well there. I'm on good terms with everybody still there, but it's not what I'm doing today. And I don't get excited to talk about it. Yes, I can share the story, but I don't want to get into like, what was the day-to-day like? It's like, no, I don't want to talk about that. Right. Brilliant. Thank you for the suggestion.
Oh, you're most welcome. And I think that's something important too, in terms of when you are being approached for opportunities or something, because podcasts are so long lasting, like, I've re-niched since I originally began my journey. So people will approach me now to speak to my previous topic. I've written a book about my previous topic, but I'm no longer interested in talking about it because it's not related to what I do now. And though technically I could do it, it doesn't feel aligned. When you have, I think in business, you have so many hours, we all do, and you want to make the best use of it. And if I'm spending that time talking about something that's not actually going to lead into anything, not that everything needs to be like, I hate the idea of being in a funnel and all that sort of stuff. It makes me feel gross. But it's like, if you're talking about something that isn't related to your current business topic, then is that the best use of your time? So that could be another example of saying no, as in, no, this isn't relevant to where I'm going anymore. And also, it's not in best service to both people, because say Alex has a show about weight loss and I go on and talk about my weight loss journey, and then people come to Alex and go, I love this talk with Suzanne, like, who do you recommend for help? Suzanne doesn't even do it anymore. So it's kind of like, it's like when you read something or whatever, and then you go to a broken link and you're like, oh, I spent all this time getting invested and excited about this, and then they don't even do it anymore.
All this goes back to the thing you talked about, like, recording is such a small part of the process. And with Podmatch, one of the ideas was to make it more of the process, because really it's like 10% is what we determine. The other 90% is all the administrative stuff. And for people listening, like, what is this Podmatch thing? I'll very briefly share. It's a service that connects podcasts, guests, and hosts for interviews. It works very similar to a dating app, but instead of connecting you for dates, it's connecting you for a podcast interview. So if you're the guest, it says, oh, you want to talk about your weight loss journey? Here's a host that show focuses on that. Vice versa. If you have a show that is about aerospace, it's going to find you aerospace engineers and people in that industry that can be a guest. You can message on the platform, and it helps do a lot of the research. And that's one of the things I like about this like kind of no-go zone that you're talking about, because it helps. And that way you're not getting on and wasting each other's time. Like, people are not like, well, tell us more about this. And you're like, okay, fine. But like, I can't, now that I don't want to share this, right? This isn't what I'm talking about anymore. And so the whole idea is just, can we remove that friction? Like, that's literally why we created this. Can we put the right people together faster, remove the friction involved, and just let them spend more time behind the microphone? Because in the day, what we're doing right now is the only element of it that, in my mind, if just thinking off the top of my head, this is the only part of it that actually adds value to a listener. Like, us strategizing it doesn't really add direct value. The only direct value is this conversation we're having right now. And so for us, like, that's the idea. Like, how do we maximize this? And that was the whole idea behind it. So like, there is so much more to podcasting than just this, but we want to make the rest of that less, so there can be more energy and focus given to this element of it.
And I think that's what I love so much about it. Like, if I speak about it from a host perspective, I have a variety of guests on my show. If you've listened to this, if this is your first episode, you might be like, what you're talking about. But I talk about people about all sorts of topics. But sometimes I'm like, I would like to talk about this. So I can go on the platform and type it in. And it was funny, a few weeks back, I was like, I'm going to talk to someone who's funny. So in your explore function, I just typed in funny, because I wanted to see, like, does somebody
Did that
describe
work?
themselves as funny? It did. Jason Barnard,
Really?
have you spoken to him, the Google
Oh,
guy?
wait, the story I told you offline about the person who was
Oh,
shaving. Sorry, now I got to share it for everybody. It was so funny. And Jason, I'm sorry if you ever hear this and you're like, what? You shared that story? He was telling me he was late for like podcasts, for being a guest on a podcast, and he needed to quickly shave. He shaved, but he nicked himself and didn't notice it. So during the conversation, blood starts dripping down toward the front of his face. Sorry if that's too graphic for everybody. That guy is so funny and so brilliant. I love that you ended up with him. That's so great.
but searching funny is how I found him. So I just thought that was hilarious. But then also too, like, when people pitch you, then you can look at, like, I've had a lot of people in this category, because I think also too, don't take the no personally, because sometimes I'll say no to someone, not because I don't think their profile looks amazing, but I've already spoken to 10 people about that topic. And a tip, if you are ever pitching, if you really want to go on a show, like, to go the extra mile, if you said, like, I've done so many episodes on podcasting, I might be like, actually, I'm not interested. But if you took the time to listen to a couple of them and said, look, I heard you talk to Alex about, Podmatch and saying no. I heard you talk to this other person about how to monetize. Here's a different angle. Like, you actually spend the time, then you've got my attention. But when you're sending me the same thing you send to everyone, and I've just like, I don't have the time, like, don't make the host do work for you. So, and that's why the Podmatch platform is great, because you have like up to 10 suggested topics or ideas or things. So sometimes I can have an idea, but it's kind of like when someone says no to me, because I'm the note coach, I can take it. And they're like, I've already spoken to someone about boundaries. I used to, in the beginning, get hurt before, but now I'm like, we haven't spoken to me. Not that I'm going to argue, I will accept their no, but it's like, it's not anything personal. And that's what I really want people to take away from this. And then if you really wanted it, you could circle back. Like, don't be like abrasive, that's just weird. But you could come back a couple months later and say, like, I know that you said this before, I've got a new idea or a new angle or a new suggestion. Are you open to hearing it? And most of the times people will say yes, because people who make my job easy for me, I'm more than happy to chat to. But people who like basically copy paste the same thing, and even if, I don't know if you get this, Alex, but people will go, like, sometimes I'll be like, dear sir, madam, like, you didn't even work out what my name is, but they'll go like, I love how your show, and they'll paste my show's description to me. And I'm just like, you haven't listened to shit. Like, seriously, I know that the easy breezy lemon squeezy thing is there because I wrote it. What did you actually like? Whereas someone's like, I love that you talk about your kids so much. I love that you wear wacky t-shirts. I love, like, whatever. And you don't need to listen to a lot to have that little personalization in the message that you send.
I am so huge on this side of things. I have people all the time reach out and, hey, I want to be on your podcast. And the worst for me, I don't know why, the worst for me is LinkedIn for some reason. Like, I get so many people reaching out on LinkedIn, and the pitches are either like so long that it like cuts off the message. So I'm already like, sorry, already you like lost me, or it's so short that I'm like, is this what? There's like, I'd like to be on your podcast or let me on your podcast. I've heard it all. And I'm like, and here's the thing, I am naturally a people pleaser. So for listeners that are here, like with the Nope Coach, I like this is, I'm learning this still today. And at first that was hard to say no, but now I'm just at the point where I'm like, I know you copy pasted this. But the most common one I get, my show has a very unique format where I'm not on most of the episodes. It's solo. And when someone says, "Hey, I enjoyed your interview with so and so," it's not an interview. I'm not even on it at all. And like, I know that you didn't listen. And I'm to the point now where I have no problem saying no to that, like instantly. And here's the thing, like what I've had to come to terms with is that I don't owe anybody who wants to be on my podcast anything, but I owe everything to the listener that says, I'm trusting Alex with my ears. That's the person I have to protect, not all the people that want to talk to those people. And so it makes it easier. Like that reframe my mind has made it much easier for me to say no. Like, sorry, you can't be on my podcast. And I find nicer ways to say that, of course. Like I always say, hey, like it's not going to be the right fit. It's the wrong time. Like something along those lines. I try to keep it as truthful as I can, but it's made it easier because so few people are willing to put in any work. But if you're willing to put in work, it's hard for me to say no, but also I typically don't want to. I'm like, wow, you're like one of the few people actually trying. Like, I probably am going to be interested in this.
But also too, if people have put in the work, like if someone sends me a pitch where I can tell they've actually listened to something, they've said something that's from an episode. Like, one lady sent me a selfie saying, I've got the same shirt as you. So she's obviously looked at something. The thing that she sent me didn't inspire me, but I loved that she had made the effort. So then we had a bit of back and forth, and then I could find an angle. So there's this lady I interviewed recently, I haven't published yet. Her name's Nan, and she is an interior designer. And I was like, it sounds amazing, but have we met? Like, I have no visual aspect whatsoever. I'm kinesthetic all the way. But then we had this chat back and forth. And to me, when I hear interior design, I think show home, like Better Homes and Gardens, whatever. And I'm like, that's not going to be my audience. But she was like, I want the home to be lived in. I want the home to represent you. And I was like, that's an angle I could talk to you about. So I think sometimes, being open to, like, if you pitch people something, first of all, actually give them topic titles, which is what I think I love about Podmatch. But even within that, if you've matched with somebody, take a few moments, look at their profile and go, and you've got this AI thing that's come up recently that you can click on and says why you were matched with this person. So that can give you a bit more insight too. But even then, I spend a few moments looking through their previous episode titles. I don't listen to them all. I'll listen to a couple, but the titles, so I can say, okay, they've already had somebody speak about boundaries, but here's a different take or whatever. And then I send them 3 suggestions and say, I'm open to your tweaks, because then I'm not making them work for it. Because sometimes people say to me, they send me a thing and go, I'll go look at my profile. I'm like, but like, not that I don't want to, but it's like, if the message says, hi, Suzanne, we match, check out my profile, I'm like, that's just like a 0 effort for me. So sometimes
Right.
that would be just kind of, it's not necessarily a no, but it's like, I have enough people spending a little bit more effort that I don't have to respond to these immediately or, potentially ever.
Yeah. I want to flip this real quick here because so what, like I think I totally resonate with that. And for me, like if I'm the host and you're just not putting the effort and stuff and I can't get what I need from you, like I know it doesn't get easier, it only gets harder. Like could you imagine after you record with somebody who's already being a pain and not giving you what you need? Like once you're done recording, you were never going to hear from that person again. Like check, done. uh Thanks for your time, right? But the one that I've struggled with a bit more is when a host reaches out to me. They put in a lot of effort, I can tell, wanting me to be on their podcast. And it's kind of because I grew up with like this mentality of don't steal somebody's blessing. Like if someone wants to give you a gift, like accept it. Don't be like, no, I couldn't, I can't. Like, no, accept that. Like that's an important thing. And I know it's a gift in their mind to bring me the podcast, but sometimes I just know that I'm not, it's not the right fit. And like I know that, but I really struggle to say no in that element because I feel like, man, that's what a jerk thing. They took all this time. They really want me there. This is like a gift for me. And I'm just like, nope. Right.
But I think
I've
if you're
struggled with that a little
genuine
bit.
in the way you respond, if you say, Dear John, because that's what we go with, thank you so much for your message. Like, it's genuine. I appreciate, whatever nuance or thing or whatever that they've put into it. And also too, it can be an honest thing. You can be like, at this stage, I am booked out until whatever, or where my show is right now, this doesn't feel like it's a fit. And then if you do want to go further, and it's totally onto you, and you know someone else, like sometimes I get things and I'm not a fit, but I know somebody who is. So I'll be like, would you like an introduction, or have you, if it's on Podmatch, have you checked out these profiles? And I'll link some others. And then that way it's kind of like, yes, it's a no and it's clear, but it's not a no ignored. Like, I just think you're not ghosting entirely, because people do that. I find that really weird. Like, even a thanks but no thanks is so much more politer than nothing.
Oh yeah.
But
By the way, I love that suggestion. I'm going to start recommending other people. So not a dead end. I'm not a dead end. I'm just like a redirection of like, hey, and not to just push them off, but like truthfully, like if they spend that time, I can spend a few minutes to see if I can find them someone that I think would actually be a good fit. I think that is absolutely brilliant. Super helpful for me. Thank you.
yeah, you're most welcome. And I think that's because it was funny. I pitched somebody on the platform and they wrote back and said, it's not a fit. And I thought, at least it was polite. They didn't just leave me on red. Then like 2 months later, they pitched me and I responded and I just said, look, I'm genuinely curious. And I was. The only thing I don't like, because I tend to do a lot of stuff by voice note and because it's written platform, but I'm like, I'm genuinely curious. How come you pitched to come on my show when I wasn't a fit for yours? And I was, but there's no tonality. So maybe they think I was being sarcastic. Anyway, they just wrote back with good point and didn't say anything further. And I thought, like, we could have had a discussion there, because sometimes it could only be a one-way fit. Like, there are some times where people come onto my show where I wouldn't be a fit on theirs, or vice versa. And I honestly believe in paying it forward. It's not like a assumed tit for tat thing. But the fact that they just said good point and nothing else, I was like, okay, next.
Hmm. I want to, for listeners today that are hearing this and like, why would you ever say no to any opportunity in the space? Like, yeah, that sounds like an abundance mindset, but we also have to be mindful of our time and like what else do we do? Because I don't know if you know this, but Suzanne and myself, we do things other than just podcast on both sides of the microphone, right? And so you have to have like a cadence. And for me, I always look 5 years into the future, not like a 5 year plan, but I just say, could I still podcast at the pace I am in 5 years from now? And the thing is, I talk to a lot of people that are like, no way. I'm like, well, okay, then when are you going to fail? Right. Because that means if you're telling me you can't do it like into the foreseeable future, then like there's something not right. And so for me, like, I don't look for a ton of guesting opportunities. I go for the right amount, the right shows, the ones I can learn from, the one I can really show up and add value to. And so for listeners today, they're like, oh man, I don't understand why you all are like weighing options here. You've got to do it. And if you said that from day one, it can be a long-term part of your life and it can be very fruitful for you and for people that get to hear your voice if you do it right. I see too much of the opposite. People are like 100 shows in 100 days or 30 shows in 30 days. I'm not like too like you can make that valuable, but you're going to get burnt out. Most people who do that, it's a hard stop after that. I'd rather see somebody sharing when they're on a podcast, sharing their own podcast and doing it for 5 years instead of over like a really short sprint period. Because if there's one thing we know in life and in the world, it's that your consistency is what's rewarded. Like your consistency is what drives results. Like if you think of any famous football to me is NFL, so I'm just going to call it NFL. All right. You look at these famous players. Like I live in Jacksonville, Florida, where the Jacksonville Jaguars are. We have some very like famous players, even though our team doesn't do well on the team. And people are like, man, they're like overnight success. Like they crushed it their senior year of college and they just got here. I'm like, no, that kid was throwing a football before he could walk. Right. Like, and we just didn't know him for 18 years in the dark, consistently sticking with it to become who they are today. And I don't mean to preach, but
No,
I wanted to share
that's
that
such
because I
a
think it's
great
really
point.
important.
Where does this fit in your business model? I think is basically what you're saying. So sometimes, getting back to why are you doing this? Are you podcasting because someone said to you, do a 30-day challenge? Or like people message me, and you said this on a video recently that you did. Like if you're on a podcast tour, like, I've written a book and I'm on a podcast tour. Those words to me immediately are like, well, that's great, but what's this got to do with me? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, I love this for you and it's amazing and good luck. But like, imagine if you went to someone's house and you're like, I'm hungry, give me food. And you're just like, you eat at the table and then you just leave. You don't help prepare beforehand. You don't clean up afterwards. You don't bring anything. You just, I'm going to the next house now because I'm hungry. And it's like, that's what it's like. And it's like, yes, you may have written a book and you may be on a tour. However, how does your book relate to this podcast? Like I've interviewed a lot of authors and the people are like, I have a book about grief and I want to talk about this bit. Great. But if you're just like getting on as many shows as you can, is it actually doing anything for you? It's like churn and burn. It's like when people do these things to get all these people to sign up for their emails. Is anyone ever actually opening them? Or are they being the seagulls who come and grab the freebie and then disappear and never open anything again afterward? So your podcast can be like that. Like, I want to get on as many as possible, but to what end? Like, are people
Right.
actually listening to a valuable conversation and thinking, this person's amazing, I want to buy their book? Because it was funny, for the first 365 episodes of my show, I had no show notes. It used to irritate some guests wildly. And I'm of the opinion, if you're listening to a show and you're like, I like this person, you would have Googled them and already bought their book or downloaded their freebie or whatever by the end. You don't even need to look at the show notes. I've changed recently because of SEO and stuff, and the chat with Jason, who we were talking about before, with Google and stuff, makes sense. But it's like, why are you doing this? As opposed to, like, I want all this exposure, but the exposure means nothing if, and also too, you've got to promote and share as well. Like, it's sometimes people, like, I had somebody send me a message and it was on behalf of, like, I pitch on behalf of, I'm never opposed to those. And I was like, that's okay. However, my show's a little bit different. I would like the person to listen to a couple episodes first, so they're familiar with the flow and we can establish a better rapport. Are they open to that? And they're like, no. John is a very busy person. He has a podcast of his own and this and this and this. And I was like, so what you're saying is he wants to take advantage of my audience and do absolutely nothing. No.
So the relationship side of podcasting to me is the real value on both sides of the microphone. Podcasting, when you're the voice, again, guest, host, both sides, you're developing know, like, and trust with an audience, but also the audience that's in the room with you. Like right now, we're building rapport, whether that's good or bad rapport. Like somehow, like we're deciding, like, do we actually know, like, and trust each other? And listeners are discovering that same thing. I think it's the beauty of the medium. What tells me that this wasn't worthwhile is if tomorrow I never hear from you again. And if I go back over at the time of recording this, I have just over 300 episodes of my show. And if I go back over, especially like the first 100 where I wasn't very good, like I had a lot of room to grow. I still have room to grow, but I really was bad, is what I'll say. And, but I can remember there's one guest in particular who every quarter, going back like 5 or 6 years now, still reaches out to me every quarter to check in. You best believe me and that individual have done a lot of work together. I have brought great clients. He's helped bring clients, like people my way that can serve and help as well. And it's one of those things where it's like, man, I can go back to that original conversation. And guess what always gets included when we're making an introduction? Here's the first conversation we ever had together. And it's our podcast episode together. What a beautiful thing. And it seems to convert super high just with their email introduction. People are like, oh, they like for real know each other, right? Like, and we can hear what they're like together. Oh, I see why this person introduced me to Alex. And so to me, like, yeah, do your, like, follow through the whole process. Let it be something that really is a true meaningful experience that you have together so that you can build upon that, because all relationship is built on meaningful experience. And that can go clearly for years in the future. You can do stuff together.
Yeah, like I had a person the other day send me an email, like a fellow business owner, thanking me for a referral. And I was like, if you don't mind me asking, who did I refer? They gave me the name of the person. And I had to sit with that. And I was like, I haven't spoken to that person. And I figured it out for 8 years because I've moved interstate twice. And we used to live in the same town. That was the last time I spoke to this person in person. So I made that referral, that connection 8 years ago. And then they finally acted on it. And also, too, a lot of people ask me my return on investment for podcasting. They're like, you've had so many episodes. What are your downloads? What are you this? What are you this? I'm like, you're asking me the wrong question. None of these things really matter. Because most of my clients that come through my show have actually come from either a guest or a host that I've been on their show. So people will send me a message. First question I ask is like, how did you find me? Because I want to thank someone. Referral is my greatest compliment. And not that long ago, I had someone say, oh, Jane such and such recommended me. And I knew the name, but I couldn't place it. I don't know if this happens to you, but you do a lot of shows. So sometimes as soon as you have a bit more information, you're like, oh, yes. So I Googled them. I was like, oh, yeah. I was on their show. That were amazing. So I wrote back to the person, said, oh, yeah, what do you think of the episode? She's like, oh, I never listened to the episode. She's like, Jane just said, Suzanne's the person that you need. So I just think we lose sight of that because you make, as you said, that know, like, trust, that rapport, that connection with the person in front of you, and other people get to listen to it, and that's great too. But I think people lose sight of the relationship with the host and is more interested in how many people come to their list. Like, to me, podcasting hasn't been the biggest list builder per se, but something like a summit, which I might get, like I did a summit recently, I had 80 people to my list. I was like, wow, overnight. But now that summit's closed, there's no further people coming in. And also of those 80, 26 immediately. Like they subscribed at 7:01 a.m., unsubscribed at 7:02. Like they grabbed the thing they wanted and they left, which is okay. Like this is what happens. But I think we don't look at, are you planting seeds with the other person you're speaking to, seeds with the listeners who could hear it years from now, as opposed to like a continual harvest, as opposed to a summit, which is a one and done. The week's over, the event's gone. You may have relationship with other people you've met there, but not the same that somebody could come across it. And the thing is, sometimes people ask me about something or someone's recommended something. And I was like, I was on a summit. Well, that's not available anymore. Like you can't listen to that. Whereas it's a podcast, I'll be like, you could find that. It's still up for people to tune into.
Something that was really hard for me to do when I was first getting started, like as an entrepreneur, was get on physical stages. And no matter what, like I struggle with them. People are always like, well, can you show me some past speaking engagements you had? All those things are closed. It's closed loop. You can buy the replays, but you're not like, there's no way to share them. And so I was like, no, here's the conferences I spoke at. I was speaking at, but I can't show you those. And then I finally had the idea of just responding because I was being a guest on a podcast, I had my own show at that point. I started sending one episode of my show and one episode of another show that I was on instead and be like, hey, sorry, all the conferences I speak at are XYZ, and I can't actually show those because they're closed, but here's me speaking as a podcast host, here's me as a guest. And I started like converting so much better because they're like, oh, there's actually something for me to hear, right?
Yes.
And they were actually doing that. So like that's another unspoken benefit. Like my direct ROI for podcasting, I can't tie it to a stage, but I'm telling you, I got on stages that I should not have had access to because someone liked a podcast episode that I had. It's hard to put a dollar amount on that, isn't it?
Well, that's the other thing too. So on my website, like SuzanneCulberg.com, if you go to the media page, originally I was putting each individual episode that I guested on up there. It made my website really slow. So what I've done now is, and anyone can do this, you go to Spotify, you don't even need a paid account, you make a free account, podcasts I've been featured on, or whatever you want to call it. I think mine's called, podcasts featuring Suzanne Culberg. Then I add them all, and then I embed that link onto my website. So then when people are looking for speakers or whatever, then they can, like a couple of times where I have been given gigs and I'm like, why me? They're like, because when I went to your website, you've been on so many things, and then you can hit play and listen to different interactions you've had. And you have that feature on the Podmatch profile. I think you can put up to 3, but I'm not sure, like podcasts that, because the thing is, that's one thing I'll always look at as a host. I don't necessarily listen to the whole episode, but I'll press play because this doesn't sound judgmental, but I'm nothing if not honest. I want to make sure they can carry a sentence, because sometimes people look really great and the topics sound amazing and whatever, but then we get chatting. Or also too, can they match my cadence? I tend to talk really fast, I'm energetic, and sometimes people are really slow. Like, do you know Rob Bell, Alex?
I do, yeah.
I have had him on the show twice. Love him so much, but it's funny. I listen to all his stuff. I always listen to him on 1.75. So when I've interviewed him live,
he's slower. Yeah.
It was so funny. It was like, oh my God, because I'm like, and he's like, and I was like, oh, it's so funny because it's like, I felt like, but to me, it wasn't the natural that I'm used to. But, in general, somebody who has a faster cadence is somebody I would prioritize. And that's just a personal thing. You might go the opposite. Sometimes people have said to me, you're too energetic. And I laugh when I get that as a response, because naturally I'm kind of like a couch potato. So I'm like the energetic couch potato, but I get what they mean.
There's
like
a future
the
brand there. That's the next version of the podcast. I'm just
it's
kidding.
actually, no, it's going to be the name of my newsletter. I'm tossing up between that and the Hot Mess Express, or the empathic bitch. I don't know, but I've decided I want to name my newsletter rather than just saying my newsletter, because that sounds so boring. But I've got the Note Coach, which is my public podcast. Then I have a private podcast called The Shit Show. So that's on Patreon, and I don't take any guests for that. But I think, branding different elements of what you do so the audience can self-select in and self-select out. Like some people don't want to listen to the interview based. And I used to have both on the Note Coach. I had, one for one. And then I decided that I personally made the choice that for my private, I wanted to go privately so I could have more of a discussion, because I find people aren't as open about discussing something on YouTube, which, anyone could see, as opposed to through Patreon. So that's another thing too, how you can carve up elements of your business and have it in different ways. Like there was one person in the network, how many podcasts does he have? Like 4 or 6 or something? I remember when we had the meeting last month or the month before, I can't remember his name, but he has a bunch of different podcasts. So
yes, great question. I don't know off the top of my head. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. But there's like, you don't have to have it all under one umbrella.
Right. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of wisdom there. Like you don't have to put it all under the same thing, and it's fine. Like with changing it. As a matter of fact, like for me, if I go back 5 years, what I was talking about on podcasts as a guest is different than what I talk about now. And my podcast is different now than it was. Like before I had Podmatch, my podcast was about entrepreneurship. And now my podcast is about being a podcast guest and a podcast host. I changed the name and everything like that. And I had a bunch of people reach out like upset about it. It's kind of like you talking about like, hey, people are like, man, you talk fast, you talk loud, right? It's great for people to self-select out, right? I had people like, man, why would you change the show? I was listening to the entrepreneurship show. Could you change it back? I'm like, no, I'm not serving you anymore. Like, you're gonna have to go find another entrepreneurship show. Like, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it rude. It's just like, man, I know who I serve and how I serve them. I need to stay very true to that. And so for me, like, if I don't have a cadence I can even get close to matching with a host, I'm not going to go on their show. Like, there was someone who wanted me on recently, and he like, I was like, is he AI? Like, how does he have such a good vocabulary? And he talks so like regal and slow. And I'm like, woo, let's go. Like, and I just know it's a mismatch. And the listeners listen because they like that about him. And they're not going to like the opposite with me. Or maybe they just wouldn't fully resonate with it. And I can only stretch so much, like any of us, we can only mirror so much before we're like not being true to who we are. It's
I
another
think
easy no, right?
I think that's such a good point in terms of, can you change it back or can you do this? There's going to be no shortage of people who are going to offer unsolicited advice. That's why when the thing earlier on, I was like, oh, I didn't actually ask him if he wanted a suggestion. So, people will say, like, I don't edit. It tends to get a lot of people offside. I think most of the time it's people who I then find out have a podcast editing company, so they're trying to pitch me. But it's kind of like, no, I'm not going to do it like this. You can go and find a show. Like, there's how many million, 3 million podcasts or something? You know the stats on
Yep.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's right.
go find one that you like rather than telling me how to do mine. And mine will evolve over time. Back to Rob Bell, I love one of the things he always says is like, that's how many Robs ago. It's like, this is how many Susas ago. So like, people have been like, I preferred the podcast when you had half interview and half solo. And then I was like, well, I have the solo on the Patreon now. Well, I don't want to pay for it. That's okay. You don't have to. But I'm
Right.
not offering that now because it wasn't in service to me. I like to have the deep discussion about whatever it is I'm talking about. I can't do that on socials, or people are emailing me, which is great. But then I need to, once again, measure my time and how much time am I responding to emails. It's not that I don't care and have compassion. It's that this is what my paid clients do. So here is a low cost way for like $10 US a month that we can have an interaction. You don't have to hire me as a coach. But if you don't want to do that, you don't have to, but you don't have to tell me how to do my business so that it serves you better.
Suzanne, if it's all right, I want to ask you a question.
Yes.
If that's all right. So after you're a podcast guest or host, I've started to find this happening. People will reach out, however they reach out, which I'm always super thankful for. And they'll ask like one of these few things. Hey, let's have a virtual coffee. Hey, I've got an opportunity I think that you really like. Hey, let's set up some sort of joint venture type of thing. I hear that afterwards. And whether I'm the guest or the host, like I always really appreciate it. But I don't have, like, I know the direction I'm going in. I don't feel like I have time for that. Right. I'm building the relationship with the guests and with the host. And like, I really know where I'm going. And there comes a point where I think we all have to acknowledge that like opportunity is distraction and it's not
Yes.
really an opportunity. And here's the thing. I'm not Elon Musk. I'm not Jeff Bezos. I'm not like Joe Rogan. But like, at what point was it acceptable for them to say no? Because as soon as I do that, people immediately go from like really nice to like wanting to like explore an opportunity to me being like, hey, I'm down to chat, but like I can't jump on a call, to being like, wow, seriously, dude? Like it turns into that. And like I just have not figured out the right nope for those people. And I'm really,
It does
it's a
happen a
struggle.
lot. So how I answer those, it honestly depends, case by case, but always with thank you for the opportunity, for the message, for thinking of me, like whatever. And I think that gives you so much bandwidth because you are appreciating it and you're letting them know. Um, you know, at this time, my focus is on this. I don't have capacity or space or however you'd word it in your language for this right now. Once again, if you know somebody who could be a fit, can I make a suggestion? Because I bet you've got a big network. Or if there's something in this space that you do in future, 100% reach out to me. So I think of an example. So this year for 2024, I focused on YouTube. Then I pivoted to Patreon, and there was a reason behind that because what happened was I'm sweary, as you know. So YouTube started restricting the
No.
views to my videos, saying this one is not appropriate and this one's not appropriate. When they restrict the views, the hours don't count towards the monetization, and you have to be logged in to be able to watch them. So I was like, this isn't the plan that I'm going to. But until I changed my mind and went over to Patreon, whenever people said, how about this summit or how about this I'm using this, like I love that idea. It's great. Thank you so much for thinking of me. In 2024, I'm doing YouTube. And this has solely got my attention because there's just so many things and so many opportunities. And, if you have something that's more aligned with this in future, and then you're still open for the conversation, but even like a coffee chat, like I do a lot of virtual networking, which I love. And sometimes people are like, let's have a coffee chat. And I'll be like, okay, yes, but to what end? Not like, but like, where are we going with this? Because I don't want to have a chat just for the sake of having a chat, because like, that's what my friends are for, with all the love in the world. But, if we're having like, I met you in a breakout room, I liked this about you, let's talk about this further, you got my attention. But I think sometimes people just follow up with everybody and they want to have a chat, or they see, like for you, I imagine, Alex has Podmatch, which is such a big platform, and they're not nefarious, but in their head, it's kind of like, how can I make this connection, even if the connection isn't quite right? And you want to, be love and appreciative for that, but you also want to be like, this isn't with where I'm going. Because like, even with Podmatch as a platform, I recommend it to everybody now. And some people like, I don't want to pay. I'm like 100%. And there was one lady who, it's funny. So on all my shows now, it's like, want to be a guest on the Note Coach. That link takes you to the Podmatch profile. So some people will literally send me an email, say, I followed the link, I don't want to pay, here's why. We have a conversation. Some people then come join, some people don't. Some people I still take, some people I don't. But the ones who circumvent that, as in they've been taken to a paid thing, and they try and come about it like by coming through my website contact page, or by just pretending not about it, and then I point them back to that. It's like, this is me giving you the steps to how you come onto my show. If you don't want to do it that way, that's okay, but it's a no from me, because I have enough guests coming this way that I don't have to pivot my thing to be in line with yours. I don't know if that helped, or if I ended up
Oh,
in a tangent.
that's so good. That's super helpful. And I think it's helpful for anyone who's listening, saying, I'm going to get into podcasting, or I'm in podcasting, either side. Because listen, it's becoming quickly one of the most powerful forms of media that exist. And so people see hosts as like, we're on a pedestal, like we're held high. If you're a guest on multiple shows, like clearly, like all these hosts that are already like so uplifted want you as well. I'm not alone in this, but I just have a struggle with this. It's super helpful. I took a ton of notes. I hope you couldn't hear me typing. Probably
No,
should have
couldn't hear you at
muted,
all.
but really good. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, but I think that's something to consider. And as we come time to wrap up, so I'm just about to hand over to you to say what it is you do and where people can find you. When the point that Alex made, if you're a podcast host, you're in charge of who you bring into your audience. You have no ties to people who approach you. But anywhere in your life, that's whether you have a podcast or not, you get to allocate where you spend your time and energy. And sometimes people will be hurt by your no. Like, it's funny, since I've become the Nope Coach, that's kind of given me a free pass. People don't tend to get as offended now, because like, oh, she's a Nope Coach. Of course she's going to say no. If I get a yes from her, I'm in. But, people will be hurt. But there's a book by Henry Cloud about pruning and stuff. The name of it's failing me right now. If anyone wants it, send me an email. No, not his boundaries book.
Okay.
It's another one. I can't think of it.
Necessary Endings?
That one, Necessary Endings. Have you read it?
I've read most of it.
So he has a thing in there where he talks about hurt versus harm. So if someone comes to me and asks for something and I say no, they can feel hurt. They're totally entitled to that, but they're not harmed by that. Like, I haven't slammed them all over social media. How dare that person? I haven't, they're not harmed. And I think sometimes we've got to be in response to our feelings and what we have going on for us. And sometimes, we do hurt people. And then the Necessary Endings talks about pruning in order to grow. If your podcast, and once you get to a stage, I get, without exaggerating, I reckon I get at least 10 pitches a week just through my email or whatever, not through Podmatch. And I only have 3 shows go out a week. So I couldn't physically take all of those people. Sometimes pruning, like the dead end, dear sir, madam, I love your show. That's an easy no. Like, dear sir, madam, you haven't even, no. But as you said, sometimes they have put in some effort, or sometimes, it is a bit harder to say no, because I do have all the compassion in the world for that. So he has the 3 lots of pruning dead things that are in the way. Dear sir, madam, easy. Pruning healthy things but aren't necessarily the best fit, because you only have so many resources. So that's the saying no to people who might either be a fit, or like pruning because you literally at capacity. Like, you're like, so sometimes on Podmatch, like when I pitch people, they're like, I'm not filming until April, or I'm not filming to this. then what I do is I go to my Google Calendar because they say come back to me then, and I'm like, I write their show and I make a message for me to go back to them, not for them to go back their 100 odd messages if I really want to be on the show, or I'll just be like, that one's not a fit. But it's like next, as in there's going to be the next opportunity rather than taking it personally. And I hope everyone takes that away, that it's not about you as a person. It's just about, you know, what's in best service to them.
That's so good. I mean, that's mic drop moment. Thank you. So
Oh, well,
good.
thank you. So on that note, Alex, handing over to you, let the listeners know what it is you do, where they can find you, anything you want to say about Podmatch, like shamelessly plug. It's all good.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that. And again, thank you for having me today, Suzanne. I really, really appreciate the time. It's been a blast. And the first thing I want to do is actually call out a prior episode of your show that I really got a lot out of. It's one that I tried to listen to passively, but I liked it so much I kept on rewinding to the point I'm like, I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to listen to this. It aired on 12/1/2024, and it's titled Grit, Honesty, and Imperfection, Courage and Communication with Amber. And I encourage everyone, go, that's your next step. Go listen to that because it's
I'm just
really
going to interrupt you
worthwhile.
quickly there, Alex. Anyone in Australia, that's 1st of December. Or maybe 30th of November even. But when you said 12/1, we do our calendar the other way around.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
I don't know if you knew that or not, because when I went to
No,
America,
I
that was the
always
hardest thing.
forget that we
Yeah.
were. I'm so sorry. It's yes, that whatever that date was, you can find it. It's
Thank you. I
around that.
appreciate that.
Thank you. Oh, I'm so sorry. Mix that up. I don't know why we Americans do things differently, but we're an odd group. But anyway, yeah, everything I do, by the way, is at podmatch.com. And I set up a specific page, podmatch.com/free. This gives you just 5 quick wins you can consume in less than 5 minutes. I don't want an email address or anything like that. If you're a podcast guest, host, or aspiring guest or host, there'll be something there for you that I think will be really valuable. And again, that's podmatch.com/free. And again, thank you so much for being here today. This has been a blast.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you, everyone, for listening. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.